So, Philip, the other day I was thinking a bit about a conversation I was having with a young man I've been helping with some career coaching. And, very typical story, Generation Z. We're putting together his resume for him. And I realized that, we got to put something in the education space, right? So I started asking him, I said, do you have a high school diploma? Yes, I got a high school diploma. I said, college degree? No, but I went to college. I have about 60 credits or something like that. And we talk a little bit about, well, when did you stop going to college? And he said, well, a couple of years ago, I just didn't feel it was worth it. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about that. And he starts describing the cost and how at the time he was working and he was feeling like his either part-time or full-time work in a restaurant, and he did a few other things as well, that was, meeting his bills, and he didn't really want the debt that was coming with the college degree. And what was so kind of poignant about that was it reminded me of conversations that I had with several other people of that generation who had also made that kind of choice for themselves. They didn't want to have the debt. And so they either chose not to go to college at all, or after, going a couple of years or, a few semesters, what have you, they just decided that they were going to either stop it entirely or put it on hold. And so it got me thinking a bit about, college education and a degree and whether it was still worth it. I was hoping we could talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's is a college education worth it? We can go into so many avenues on that particular subject, but specifically, is it worth it? I mean, I guess we would have to define the worth part of it, right? For someone like, I think I know you pretty well by now, Carlos, but you and I, was it worth it for us? I would say it was, being that we came from immigrant families, and as a matter of fact, every immigrant group, Irish, Italians, Polish, whatever, it doesn't matter. They all ended up going to school, and that was many times their ticket to get into mainstream or middle class, upper middle class, or just change their lives, right? Go to school, get a degree, go work for a company or get a business going or something. So definitely worth it. And so from that perspective, specifically now for a younger generation, millennials, what has changed? Has that changed? Some things have changed, some things haven't, right? Technology has just changed the way we do many things. As a matter of fact, you have, I'm sure there's a lot of companies like Apple, Google, Netflix, that they don't even require a college degree, right? Who's the guy? Elon Musk, although he's educated, right? Or he's got multiple degrees. He's like, I don't care if you don't have a college degree. Come work for Tesla, and, we care about what you can do and what kind of technology, So I can see where some millennials may think a college degree does not add any value from that perspective. And that very well may be. We're living in a time where technical knowledge is at a high demand.
Sure.
So certifications, certificates, and so on, programming, software development, all of these things. So like, if you know how to do it, come on down. Right. But then the question I'll go back to you is, does this remind you of the Industrial Revolution when factories were being opened, right? Left and right, and they needed workers, and they just needed a bunch of workers. Sure. So you, being an HR leader, tell me, is there a limiting factor to a lot of these people that may not have a college degree down the road?
Well, it's a really great question. I think it's been a question on the minds of company leadership and HR leadership for a real long time. I think it's kind of coming to a head in the Great Resignation. But I can tell you that even before the Great Resignation, even before the pandemic, I was beginning to see a bit of a change in the perspectives of our leaders and our HR policy. Right, we were already beginning to say, look, for this job, do we really need a college degree for it? So pick any one of them. It could have been in an accounting function, it could have been in an operations function, a technical function, et cetera. I think a couple of things have influenced that. One of the things that's influenced it is just the search for talent, right? When you have, and even more so nowadays, I think we're at a 4% unemployment rate as of just a couple of days ago. When you are looking for people and you're having to cast the net really, really wide, and you're not getting the kind of candidates that you want at that very refined requirement, must have a 4-year degree or must have a master's degree or what have you. I think we're really having to go out there and say, okay, get whoever you can, as long as they have this experience or they have that. So that's number one. I think another thing that we've seen over the last maybe 10 years or so is just the advent of certification programs, right? And how those certification programs presumably, and I'm going to use that word, presumably, prepare people for some of those roles. We know that that's true, especially with some of the programming roles, some of the information security roles, those things like that. That programs out of Microsoft or from some of the other big software companies, if you will, have really prepared people effectively for some of those roles, and some of those roles garner a really, really decent salary, right, for people who choose to get those certifications and then work in those fields. So I think that's the second thing. I think a third thing is there's just been this recognition that's maybe taken a little while to get there, that you don't need a college degree for everything. And so companies have lightened their requirement, if you will, particularly for what I'll call entry-level roles and even up to supervisory roles, where I think the requirement has maintained itself and probably will continue to maintain itself into the future is for more senior level managerial roles. I can tell you very clearly that I had been in more than one conversation with companies who were going at that question, and they basically said, look, we're okay with having a person come into a supervisory role without a degree, but our expectation is that if they're going to move into the next level, either manager or director or what have you, they really are going to need that, both from a technical knowledge perspective, but also because of who they're working with, right? They're going to tend to be working with much more senior level professionals. Those individuals have those degrees in order to be able to interact with them effectively, in order to be able to problem solve with them effectively, in order just to have a common base of knowledge from which they can work and be efficient. They need to have that. So, companies have kind of maintained that line, at least anecdotally speaking. But, the thing that I think about is, regardless of what companies are asking, right? What's the truth? What is the answer around whether, in fact, those degrees are worth it? I mean, what's your take? I've got some information that I'll share, but what is your sense of it?
So, look, going back to the original question, is it worth it? I think the way we have college degree today, which is a 4-year degree, right? Undergraduate, we're talking about,
or 2-year associates.
Okay, fair enough. But I think if you have an associate and get certifications and work in technology, you're well prepared. Maybe get a 4-year degree in business or something similar if you want to go up the management ladder, if you will. But if we talk about 4-year degrees, 50% of the people that go to college, 50% regret what they study in college. That's, it's like they went for one thing, like I should have done something else. 41% of college graduates are underemployed. Okay. And I was just relating to you a little earlier that there are some times when, they're requesting that you have a bachelor's or an MBA or a master's. And the reality is, even when you end up with a master, an MBA, master in business administration, I've seen so many MBA. I have MBAs from Carnegie Mellon, UCLA, Michigan, UC Fullerton, USC, worked for me, Columbia worked for me. The one from the state school was the best one. Okay, they're not masters in business administration. They're not mastering. They're doing logistics. They're doing financial analysis. They're doing one piece of HR or whatever engineering. They're not masters. They just have, and I gotta be very honest. A lot of the education, higher education, it's a business, and as a business, they need a lot of students. Because otherwise, what would happen? A lot of the universities with the pandemic and so on suffered greatly in a reduction of tuition. I think it's to the extent of $30 billion. That's a lot of money. Okay, a lot of income. And not to complicate, and that's what I said. This is such a diverse point. Is it worth it? The cost of an education is grown. Today's cost, college cost, is about 3 times higher what it used to be in the 1990s. So it's going up 300%. However, when you get out of college, your average compensation is going up. I think it's no more than probably 20%. How do you explain that? Yeah. Right? Having said that, to what you said earlier, is a college degree worth it? I guess it all depends on where you're in life. I mean, if you want to get out of a certain situation and move on to the next level in your life, yeah, that's the way out. It happened for you. It happened for me. Is the cost of an education worth it? That is a completely different point. And that could be a quick take or a podcast in itself.
Well, let's talk about it. So, one of the studies I read recently was a study by an organization called the Third Way Group. They're kind of a public policy organization, and in fact, I learned of this study really through a Forbes article. And so I went back to the original paper that was written by Third Way Group, and what they set out to do was in effect evaluate. Really from an economic perspective, whether a college degree was quote unquote worth it, right? So as part of the process, they created something called a price to earnings premium, or the PEP, right? And the price to earnings premium is basically a calculation, and it's got some specific factoring that they do in there, but they in effect look at the cost of a college education, and then how long it takes for the person who graduates with that degree from that college program to, in effect, recoup their cost, right? So, just in case anybody's shocked by this, a typical state tuition is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, $25,000 a year. If you're in a private setting, Ivy League or just private university, it's probably going to be north of 50. In some cases, it's $60,000, $70,000 a year. And so they basically looked at these various programs and they calculated it. And some of the findings I think were expected, and some of them were quite interesting. Would you like to hear some of those?
Absolutely.
Right, so.
Do tell.
So a couple things, and I'm gonna I made some notes so that I don't lose it. Right. So they looked at associate's degrees, they looked at certificate programs, and they looked at bachelor's degrees. So nothing on master's degrees, doctorates, et cetera. But just in terms of the certificate, associates, or bachelor's, I thought some of these figures were kind of important. So as you can expect, they were typically pretty high ROI on a bachelor's degree, slightly lower ROI on associate's degree, and lower ROI on certificate programs. So that's one finding. Perhaps one of the most interesting findings, however, and there's been lots of talk over the years, studies, cases, anecdotes of whether it's better to go to a private institution or a public institution. So you and I went to, at least for our undergraduate degrees, we went to the City University of New York, which is a public institution, right?
That's right.
And let's contrast that with, for example, a private institution. I got my master's degree from a private institution, and I think you did as well. But the point about it was that The cost of that undergraduate degree was much less than the graduate degree, in spite of the fact that I was doing 4 years here and I was doing 2 years here, right? And so one of the interesting things in their study was that in terms of ROI, just once again, bachelor's degree, they got a faster ROI from public institutions than they did private, right? The way that they calculated it was that it was something like 56% ROI in the case of the public versus 31%. And by the way, this is within a 5-year period, following the person getting the degree. I thought it was especially interesting because when you look at the for-profit, right, and I won't name some of the for-profits, we're going to protect the names of the innocent here, it was 29%. So just think about this. Think about the most expensive university you could go for.
Not so innocent.
Right? The idea is that it's going to be a private Ivy League university compared to, for example, a for-profit institution. Academically speaking, they're like this, right? Far apart from one another. But the actual return on investment was only 29% in the case of the for-profit versus 31% for the private. I thought that was pretty interesting. I think another thing that was kind of interesting in this study was they looked at the fields of study. Okay, in other words, which degree programs paid off versus those that didn't pay off. What do you think was in the the degree programs that paid off? Just off the top of your head, what do you think was in those degree programs? Which programs were those?
Look, I do have a little bit of background working in education, at least when I was doing that, right, for higher education. When I was doing, and I'm going to say exactly what I said before, engineering, technology or information systems, business of some sort, healthcare, and I forget the fifth one. It might have to do with law or something like that.
Okay, so that's a pretty good list. So here's where I think you hit it right on the nail on the head. So healthcare, that was one of those 4-year degree programs, especially in nursing and nursing adjacent type of roles. Those paid off. Okay. Engineering, especially electrical engineering, right? So those paid off pretty well, and various others, petroleum engineering, et cetera. Another one that really, really paid off was construction management, right? You got construction happening all over the United States. Interestingly enough, that paid off. Here's some of the ones that didn't pay off, okay? Drama, dance, music, fine arts. Everything that our parents told us, don't go into that. Those don't pay off, and they certainly didn't pay off from that perspective. But some of the other ones where, one could argue were kind of, passion professions, things like zoology. I mean, every one of us has had a kid in our life, at least at one part of their life, who said, Dad, when I grow up, I want to be a zoologist. They don't pay off very well. Anthropology, some of the sciences didn't pay off as well. And another one that didn't pay off very well was theology or religion. That didn't pay off either, right? So, the moral of the story is that if you are getting a 4-year degree, get it in healthcare, get it in engineering, get it in construction management. I'll tell you what was surprising: business didn't make it, and law didn't make it. Right? Those were not degree programs.
Really, that is surprising. That is extremely surprising. I mean, and when I used to be in education, meeting with presidents and provosts in different parts of the world, business was always one of the highest demand, because everything is around us. It's a business, right? So you end up in one aspect or another, whether it is analysis, financial, management, or so. But business, surprising.
Yeah.
But to your point about those degrees, zoology, maybe psychology or something like that, I think a lot of it has to do with, like you said, they're devoted to that particular, hopefully, right? They're devoted to that particular subject or matter. And not surprising, the payback is not there. Yeah. But then again, and I think you and I might have mentioned this before, it's just like, but it's worth it to the individual. It's to their passion. You
It
know,
goes to the definition, right? Of what do you consider of value or worth, right? I mean, at least in this study, they were talking very much about economic value. But to your point, plenty of people pursue degree programs not because they're looking to make a fortune, but rather because it satisfies a passion or an interest that they have. And so the question really becomes, is there a way of lining those two things up? Right? The personal and the economic.
Absolutely. And for me, I think you might know my story as an immigrant. I mean, I wanted to be a physical ed professor because I liked, lifting weights and playing soccer and tennis and basketball. I'm just physically active, highly competitive. But I realized that you had to get a master's and a PhD. And even then you were making a fraction of you make in finance or accounting.
Right.
And, I just came to the realization if I wanted to make a better living, and this was 100% financially driven, I got to do something that pays the bills a lot easier.
Sure.
And I switched.
Yeah.
But I didn't end up in finance. I ended up doing actually sales and marketing. That's what I do now, general management and sales and marketing. So I may be one of those statistics of people that are, I don't regret what I studied. Mm-hmm. I just went a different avenue. And I think most individuals will end up with maybe 2 or 3 or 4, sometimes different careers in their lifetime. Right. Not 100% what they studied. Right. So is a college degree worth it?
Yeah, great question. I think my take is that, once again, if your goal is really to pursue a passion and you think a college degree will get you there, and chances are you'll be able to pursue your passion that way, that's fine. But if you're looking at it from a strict economic standpoint, the answer really depends on what you choose to study, right? This is one study. There are probably other studies which would expand the types of programs that the result came from. My guidance, to anybody who comes to me, and this is really, from a personal perspective, but also from experience being on the other side, hiring the people, is, once again, if your goal is to try and progress within an organization, a college degree is worth it. And certainly what this study showed is, once again, that if you focus within a couple of key areas, the payback that you're going to get is going to be much quicker than if you chose, other areas. So, that's my take on it. How about you?
I concur. I think a college degree is worth it. I think what has muddied up the water a little bit is the cost of education. Yeah. And there is some misunderstanding that because the cost is so high because of some institutions, and we could get into that in a different podcast, then people think it's not worth it. I think a college degree is worth it. Even if at the very least you get something basic, and then you want to get some certificates to go into programming or doing something in technology, a college degree will never hurt you, even if you venture into other interests in your life. Having said that, as I mentioned, do be careful not to get into high debt by some, degrees that have been positioned to change the world or your life, but they're really not going to do that. Only you can do that.
Well said.
This is our take. Until next time, be good.
And do good.
All right. Bye-bye, guys. Care.